The first time I met Nargis Apa, she held my face in both hands and told me I had eyes like her own daughter who had died young. She wept real tears. I believed every one of them. I was 26 when I married Bilal, and I came into that marriage with more than most brides in our family ever carried. A small plot of land left by my father, a fixed deposit my mother had quietly grown over 20 years, and a savings account I had built myself through 6 years of teaching. I was not wealthy by any grand measure, but I was secure. I was standing on ground that belonged to me. Bilal was a good man, gentle, a little easily led, the kind of son who could never say no to his mother. I saw it early, but I told myself it was loyalty. I told myself it was love. I was not entirely wrong. It was both of those things. It was also the door through which everything I owned would almost be taken from me. Nargis Apa moved in with us 4 months after the wedding. Bilal's father had passed the previous year, and she was alone in the old house in the village. It seemed cruel to leave her there. So we brought her to the city, into our flat, into our life. She cooked beautifully. She pressed Bilal's clothes. She called me Betty, daughter, with such warmth that I began to soften in ways I had not expected. She asked small favors at first. Could I add her name to the grocery account so she could order without bothering us? Could I sign a form for her bank? Something about a pension update she did not fully understand? Could she borrow the property file just to show a relative who was asking about land rates in our area? Each request came wrapped in helplessness, in affection, in the particular exhaustion of an old woman navigating a world she said had grown too complicated. I said yes. Again and again, I said yes. What I did not know then was that she understood paperwork far better than she pretended. What I did not know was that she had done this before. And what I did not know, not yet, was that she had already begun. It was Bilal's illness that gave her the opening she had been waiting for. He was diagnosed in the March of our 3rd year of marriage. Nothing fatal, the doctors were careful to say, but serious enough to pull him out of work for 4 months. Serious enough to hollow his face and slow his walk and make him dependent on medications that fogged his thinking in the early weeks. He was not himself, and when Bilal was not himself, the person who stepped into that space, quietly, efficiently, with the confidence of someone who had planned for exactly this, was his mother. She became the manager of the house overnight. She answered phone calls. She spoke to the doctors on his behalf when I was at school teaching. She handled the paperwork for his medical insurance claim, and she did it well. I gave her credit for that, even later when I had very little credit left to give. But managing the house was not enough for Nargis Apa. A house was not what she had come for. The fixed deposit was the first thing she touched. She had watched me renew it the previous year, had sat right beside me at the bank, asking innocent questions about how such accounts worked, who could access them, what documentation allowed changes to nominee details. I had answered her warmly, proud to explain something I understood. I had not realized I was being studied. She had Bilal sign a nominee change form during a week when his fever was high and his judgment was low. She told him it was a routine update the bank required. He signed without reading. He trusted her the way sons trust mothers, completely and without the instinct for self-protection that the rest of us slowly learn. She moved on my property file next. A photocopy here, an inquiry there, a quiet visit to a property lawyer in the next neighborhood, whom she paid in cash and never mentioned to anyone. She was building something, a case, a claim, a version of events in which my assets had always been family assets, in which I had always been the outsider, holding on to things that did not truly belong to me. She worked in silk gloves. She left no fingerprints. She smiled at dinner every single night. And I, still busy loving my sick husband, did not yet look down at my own hands to notice what was missing. It was a single line in a bank statement that cracked everything open. I had gone to renew my fixed deposit in October, the way I did every year, quietly and without telling anyone, a habit my mother had drilled into me since girlhood. Your money is your private matter. You tell no one, not even people you love. I had smiled at that advice when she gave it. I was not smiling now. The teller looked at her screen for a long moment, then looked at me, then back at her screen. She asked me to wait. She called a senior officer. He came out with the careful, measured expression of a man delivering difficult news to someone he did not know, and he told me, in a low voice that somehow still felt too loud, that the nominee on my fixed deposit had been changed 8 months ago. The new nominee was not Bilal, it was Nargis Begum, his mother, my mother-in-law. I drove home without crying. That surprised me. I had expected to fall apart, and instead I felt something settle in my chest, cold and precise, like a key turning in a lock. I did not confront her. I did not tell Bilal. I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and I began to think. Over the next 6 weeks, I became a different kind of woman. I called my mother's old lawyer, a quiet man named Mr. Salim, who had handled my father's estate and who had known me since I was a child. I told him everything. He listened, without interrupting, which told me he had heard versions of this story before. Then he told me what to do, and I did it with a precision that I think surprised even him. I pulled every document I owned and made 3 sets of copies, one at home, one at Mr. Salim's office, one in a bank locker, only I had the key to. I requested transaction histories. I filed a written inquiry about the nominee change and who had authorized it. I contacted the property registrar's office and placed a quiet alert on my land file. I gathered receipts, dates, signatures, and cross-referenced them against calendars until a clear picture emerged of exactly what had been done and exactly when. She had been careful, but I was more careful, and for the first time in months, I slept deeply because I was no longer waiting to understand what was happening to me. I knew, and knowing, I had already begun to win. I chose Eid, not out of cruelty, or perhaps a little out of cruelty, the justified kind that lives quietly in a woman who has been underestimated for too long. Eid was when the whole family gathered. Bilal's 2 brothers, their wives, an aunt who had always adored Nargis Apa and repeated everything she said as though it were scripture. It was the one occasion where Nargis Apa felt most powerful, most centered, most untouchable. I wanted her to feel all of that before I took it away. She had made the seviyan herself that morning, stirring the pot with the satisfaction of a woman who believed she had already won. She served everyone with her own hands, touching shoulders, kissing foreheads, performing the role of beloved matriarch with the ease of long practice. I watched her from across the room and felt nothing except clarity. After lunch, when the tea was poured and the children had gone outside, I opened the folder I had carried in my bag and placed it on the table. Quietly, no drama, no raised voice, I said, simply, "Ammi, I think we need to talk about some paperwork." The room shifted. Bilal looked at me with confusion. The aunt straightened. Nargis Apa's eyes went to the folder the way a person's, as eyes go to a thing they recognize and hoped never to see again. I did not accuse her. I presented the original nominee form with Bilal's signature, taken during his illness, during the exact week his fever had peaked, alongside his medical records showing his condition that week. The property inquiry logs showing her name and contact number registered at the registrar's office. The lawyer's bill she had paid in cash, which Mr. Salim had somehow, quietly, obtained a copy of. The timeline, printed cleanly, that showed every move she had made and every date she had made it. I gave each person at the table their own copy. She tried denial first, then she tried tears, the real-looking ones, the same ones she had used the first day I met her. Then she looked at her sons and found that even they had gone quiet in a way that told her the tears were not going to be enough this time. Bilal reached across the table and took my hand. He did not let go. I looked at Nargis Apa and said nothing more. The documents had already said everything. I had simply made sure, this time, that everyone in the room could read them.